Have you ever followed directions so blindly that you walked straight into a world you were never meant to see? A young woman did when her GPS sent her to the wrong address at 2 a.m., and the man who answered the door was a Korean Mafia boss who would change her life forever. Before we dive deeper into this story, take a moment to hit that like button if you love suspenseful, emotional stories that keep you on the edge of your seat. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next thrilling chapter. We also want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Whether it's your city, your country, or even just your favorite spot to watch these stories, we love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's get back to the story and see just how far courage can take someone when danger is closing in. The GPS app on her phone had guided her through dozens of cities without issue. She trusted it completely as she navigated the unfamiliar streets at 2 a.m., her rideshare shift finally over after a grueling 14-hour day. She was exhausted, running on caffeine and determination, trying to make rent after her roommate bailed. One more fare, the app had promised. One more pickup at this address. Then she could finally go home. But as she turned down the narrow street, something felt off. This wasn't the bustling hotel district the pickup location suggested. These were residential townhouses, expensive ones. The kind with discreet security cameras and doors that cost more than she made in 6 months. No rideshare customer would be waiting here at 2 a.m. Still, the GPS insisted she'd arrived. The blue pin pulsed confidently on her screen. Maybe a guest house? A service entrance? She'd already driven here. She might as well confirm. The October air bit at her skin as she stepped out, her white sneakers silent on the pristine sidewalk. She pulled her camel trench coat tighter, suddenly aware of how out of place she looked. The townhouse before her was imposing, dark stone, heavy wooden door, warm yellow light barely visible through frosted glass panels. She searched for a doorbell. Found one. Pressed it. Nothing. Checked her phone again. Definitely the right address according to the app. Maybe they couldn't hear it inside? She knocked. 3 firm raps. The door opened immediately, as if someone had been standing right there. A man filled the doorway. Early 30s, powerfully built, in an expensive black suit with an open collar. Tattoos crawled up his neck. His dark hair was slicked back, and his expression was utterly unreadable. Cold, controlled, dangerous. Behind him, she glimpsed movement. At least 3 more men, all watching her. The warm interior light spilled out around him like he was standing at the gates of something forbidden. Everything about him radiated authority, command, threat. I'm here for pickup? Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. Rideshare? The app sent me to. His eyes narrowed. He looked at her phone screen, still glowing with the pickup address. Something flickered across his face, recognition, then something darker. Wrong address, he said, his accent slight but distinct. Korean, she thought. His tone was flat, final. No one here called for a ride. But the GPS, she started. Your app was redirected, he interrupted, still blocking the doorway. Someone sent you here deliberately. He paused, studying her with unsettling intensity. You shouldn't be here. This neighborhood doesn't appreciate uninvited visitors. Especially not at 2 a.m. Especially not witnesses. The word hung in the air between them. Witnesses. To what? I'm leaving, she said quickly, taking a step back. Your car is being watched, he said quietly, gesturing almost imperceptibly to the street. She followed his gaze and saw, or thought she saw, a shadow move near her vehicle. 3 men. They've been following you for the last 20 minutes. They're the ones who changed your GPS route. Her blood went cold. Why would? Wrong place, wrong time, he said. Or perhaps Exactly the right place at the right time, depending on how you look at it. His eyes held hers. You have two choices now. Get back in that car and hope they just want to scare you. Or step inside and let me explain why someone wants to use you to find me. Rose's hand was still raised from knocking when the door swung open with such force it made her stumble backward. The man who filled the doorway looked like he'd stepped out of a different world entirely, one where power wore tailored suits and danger had a face you couldn't look away from. He stood there in the spill of golden light from inside, his black suit jacket hanging open over a black shirt, no tie. The ink on his neck caught her eye first, intricate patterns that disappeared beneath his collar, the kind of tattoos that meant something, that told stories she probably didn't want to know. His dark hair was slicked back perfectly despite the late hour, and his face, sharp jawline, intense eyes, held an expression that made her stomach drop. This was not an Airbnb host. Rose started, but the word died in her throat as she registered the movement behind him. 3 men, maybe 4, materializing from the shadows of an enormous entryway. They weren't moving toward her. Not yet, but they were watching. Waiting. The kind of stillness that came right before violence. The man in the doorway said nothing. He just looked at her, his gaze sweeping over her trench coat, her sneakers, her overnight bag with a thoroughness that felt like an X-ray. She could practically see him cataloging details, filing them away, deciding what kind of threat she posed it to in the morning on his doorstep. Wrong house, he finally said. His voice was deep, accent slight but unmistakable. The words carried absolute authority, the kind that expected obedience without question. I'm so sorry, Rose said quickly, her heart hammering against her ribs. The GPS said this was the address. I'm looking for a rental property, an Airbnb, 2315 Ashford Street. Something shifted in his expression. His eyes narrowed fractionally, and she saw him exchange a glance with one of the men behind him. A silent conversation she couldn't read but felt in her bones was about her, about whether she was lying, about what to do with her now that she'd seen their faces. This is 215 Ashford Street, he said, his tone marginally less hostile. Your property is 2 blocks north. Relief crashed through her like a wave, followed immediately by a flush of embarrassment that burned hot on her cheeks. Of course. The GPS had glitched, or she typed it wrong, or it didn't matter. She just knocked on a stranger's door at 2 a.m., a stranger who clearly valued his privacy and had the kind of security that suggested he had reasons to. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, she said, already turning away. I really apologize for disturbing you. Wait. The single word stopped her cold. It wasn't loud, wasn't shouted, but it carried a weight that made disobedience feel impossible. Rose turned back slowly, every instinct screaming at her to run, to get back in her rental car and drive away as fast as possible. He was studying her again, but differently now. Not assessing a threat, assessing something else. His eyes moved over her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle, like he was trying to solve a puzzle she didn't know she represented. You're alone, he asked. Yes. She tried to keep her voice steady, tried to project a confidence she absolutely did not feel. I'm here for a business meeting tomorrow. I just flew in late and booked an Airbnb for the night. And you trust your GPS to take you through this neighborhood at 2 a.m. without verifying the address first? There was something in his tone that made Rose bristle despite her nervousness, despite the very real danger emanating from him and the men behind him. The GPS has never been wrong before, she said. And I was careful. I didn't see any signs that the neighborhood was dangerous. One of the men behind him made a sound, a laugh. Maybe, or a scoff. The man in the doorway silenced him with a glance, then looked back at Rose. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, which somehow made it more unsettling. "This neighborhood is very dangerous," he said, "especially at 2 a.m. Especially for someone who clearly doesn't belong here." Rose's grip tightened on her bag. "I'm leaving now," she said, taking another step backward. "Again, I'm sorry for the disturbance." But he continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Your rental property. 2 blocks north. The building with the blue door and the security keypad that hasn't worked properly for 3 days." Rose stared at him. How do you know that?" His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or something darker. "I know everything that happens in this neighborhood," he said simply. Rose felt the words settle over her like ice water. He knew about the broken keypad. He knew about a property 2 blocks away that she'd never even seen yet. What else did he know? "I should go," she said again, but her feet weren't moving. Something in his tone, in the way he was looking at her now, kept her rooted to the spot. He tilted his head slightly, still blocking the doorway. "What's the name of your host?" What?" "The Airbnb." "Who's the host?" Rose fumbled with her phone, pulling up the app with shaking fingers. David Chen. 5-star rating. Verified profile." "Show me." It wasn't a request. Rose held out her phone, and he took it from her hand with a swiftness that made her flinch. His fingers moved across the screen, scrolling through her reservation details with a kind of familiarity that suggested he knew exactly what he was looking for. His jaw tightened. He looked up at one of the men behind him. "Check it." The man disappeared into the house. Rose stood there on the doorstep, her phone in a stranger's hand, watching him examine her reservation like he was reading a threat assessment, which she was starting to realize with growing dread maybe he was. "How much did you pay?" he asked, not looking up. "200 for the night." It seemed reasonable for the area. "It's a scam." He handed her phone back. "The property exists. The keypad is broken. But David Chin doesn't own it. The real owner is in Seoul for the month. Someone is using her listing to run a theft operation." Rose's stomach dropped. "What?" "You show up at 2 a.m., tired, alone. The keypad doesn't work. You try the back door, also broken as I mentioned. You go inside. You're robbed. Maybe just your valuables. Maybe worse, depending on who's waiting inside." He said it flatly like he was describing the weather. "It's been happening in this neighborhood for 2 weeks now. But the reviews. Fake. All of them." He stepped out onto the doorstep, and Rose instinctively moved back. He was taller than she'd realized, and standing this close, she could see the full extent of the tattoos on his neck, the expensive watch on his wrist, the way his suit fit like it had been made specifically for him. "You can't stay there. I'll find another hotel." "At 2 a.m.? With your credit card information already compromised?" He shook his head. "By now, they know you tried to check in here instead. They know their setup is blown. They'll be watching for you to leave." Rose looked past him at the street, at her rental car sitting under the streetlight. Suddenly the shadows seemed deeper, more threatening. "Are you saying I'm in danger right now?" "I'm saying you made yourself a target the moment you booked that property." He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. "My driver will take you to the Corbett. It's a hotel on the east side. High security, no questions asked. You'll be safe there." "I can't afford." "It's handled." Rose blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "The room is handled. You'll stay there tonight. Check out tomorrow after your meeting." He looked at her, and for the first time, his expression softened slightly. Not friendly, he still looked like he could be dangerous if he wanted to be, but less cold. "Consider it an apology for my city's hospitality failing you." "I don't understand." "Why would you?" "Because you knocked on my door instead of walking into a trap." He glanced back at the man who'd gone inside, who now reappeared, and gave a subtle nod. Confirmation of something. And because I don't like scam operations running in my neighborhood. A black car pulled up to the curb, so quickly and quietly that Rose wondered if it had been waiting nearby all along. The driver got out, another well-dressed man with the same alert watchfulness as the others, and opened the back door. "Go," the man in the doorway said. "My driver knows where to take you. Your business meeting tomorrow, where is it?" "The Morrison Building, downtown. He'll have you there by 8:30. It wasn't a suggestion. Rose looked at the car, at the open door, at this stranger who somehow knew everything about a scam she'd nearly walked into. Every reasonable instinct told her not to get in that car, not to trust a man who radiated danger and had guards in his house at 2 a.m. But every other instinct, the ones that had kept her alive in bad neighborhoods and worse situations, told her he was telling the truth. That the real danger was behind her, not in front of her. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded once. "Don't trust your GPS next time." Rose woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and forgot, for a disoriented moment, where she was. Then it came back in a rush. The wrong address, the dangerous man in the doorway, the quiet car ride through empty streets to a hotel so elegant she'd felt underdressed just walking through the lobby. The Corbett. He'd called it high security, no questions asked, and he hadn't been exaggerating. The front desk had her name ready before she'd even spoken. Her room was on the 18th floor, with a view of the city skyline. There was a breakfast card on the nightstand, prepaid. Even her rental car had been moved to the hotel's private garage. She should have been terrified. She should have called the police, reported everything, gotten on the first flight home. Instead, she'd slept better than she had in months. Now, standing in front of the bathroom mirror at 7 a.m., Rose studied her reflection. The woman looking back at her had dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could fully hide, but her gaze was steady, focused. She'd come here for a reason, and a near miss with a scam operation wasn't going to derail that. She dressed carefully, tailored black pants, a crisp white blouse, her camel trench coat for the walkover. Professional, competent. The kind of architect who could transform a dated commercial space into something visionary. She packed her portfolio with the same precision she applied to her designs, double-checking that every rendering, every blueprint, every material sample was exactly where it needed to be. The driver from last night was waiting in the lobby. He nodded when he saw her, gestured toward the car. Rose hesitated only a moment before following. Whoever that man was, whatever he was, he'd kept his word about getting her here safely. She could at least trust him to get her to the Morrison Building. The morning traffic was thick, but the driver navigated it with the same quiet efficiency he'd shown last night. He pulled up to the Morrison Building at exactly 8:28, giving her a 2-minute buffer. Rose took a breath, grabbed her portfolio, and stepped out into the cool morning air. The lobby of the Morrison Building was all marble and chrome, the kind of modern aesthetic that either impressed clients or intimidated them. Rose let it energize her instead. This was her world, angles and light, space and flow, the mathematics of beauty. She knew how to move in it. The client meeting was on the 14th floor. Rose announced herself to the receptionist, was led to a glass-walled conference room where 3 people waited. The CEO, Marcus Webb, mid-50s with sharp eyes and an expensive suit. His CFO, Linda Park, younger, skeptical expression already in place. And their operations manager, whose name Rose missed in the flurry of handshakes, but whose body language screamed gatekeep first, approve never. "Ms. Hayes," Marcus said, gesturing to the seat across from him. "We've been looking forward to this." Rose spread her portfolio across the table, her hands steady despite the caffeine and adrenaline cocktail in her bloodstream. "Thank you for the opportunity. I've reviewed your current space and your expansion goals, and I think you'll find my proposal addresses both your practical needs and your brand vision. She clicked open her laptop, pulled up the first rendering. The operations manager leaned back, arms crossed. Linda's expression remained neutral. But Marcus leaned forward. Your current layout, Rose began, maximizes square footage, but minimizes flow. Employee satisfaction surveys show a 23% dissatisfaction rate with collaborative spaces. Customer traffic patterns indicate confusion at key decision points. She pulled up the data visualizations, let them speak for themselves. My design solves both issues while reducing your operational costs by 15% through smart HVAC, zoning, and natural light optimization. She walked them through it, page by page, rendering by rendering, showed them how the open floor plan could feel intimate with strategic partition walls, how the customer flow could guide itself with architectural cues instead of signage, how every material choice served both aesthetic and budgetary purposes. Linda's arms uncrossed halfway through. The operations manager started taking notes. Marcus smiled. This is exactly what we needed, he said when Rose finished, 45 minutes later. The other firms gave us variations on what we already have. You're giving us a solution. Rose felt something settle in her chest. Not relief, but confirmation. She was good at this. She'd always been good at this. Last night's chaos hadn't changed that. When can you start? Marcus asked. As soon as you're ready. They shook hands. Signed preliminary agreements. Discussed timelines and budgets and site visits. By the time Rose walked back through the Morrison Building lobby, the sun was higher in the sky, and she had the biggest contract of her career in her bag. The black car was still waiting at the curb. Rose sat in her hotel room that evening, laptop open, cursor blinking in an empty email. She'd been staring at it for 20 minutes. How exactly did you thank someone for saving you from walking into a robbery, or worse, when you didn't even know their name? She'd asked the driver that morning, casually, as they'd pulled away from the Morrison Building. Your boss, what's his name? The driver's eyes had met hers in the rearview mirror, polite but impenetrable. He prefers to handle introductions personally, miss. Which meant she was on her own. Rose pulled up the hotel's information on her phone, found the general contact email, and started typing before she could overthink it. To whom it may concern. No. Too formal. To the gentleman at 215 Ashford Street. Better. I wanted to thank you for your help last night. You were right about everything, the listing, the scam, the danger I didn't see coming. Because of you, I was safe, rested, and able to deliver the pitch of my career this morning. I got the contract. I don't know why you helped me. I don't know who you are really, but I know I'm grateful. If there's ever anything I can do to return the favor, I mean that. Rose Hayes. She added her phone number at the bottom, hesitated, then hit send before she could second-guess herself. The reply came 3 hours later, just as she was getting ready for bed. Rose. Congratulations on the contract. You earned it. I simply made sure you had the opportunity to show what you're capable of. You asked who I am. My name is Sung-ho, and you don't owe me anything. Consider it a welcome to the city, the real city, not the version tourists see. Though I'm curious about something. You said it was the pitch of your career. What makes it different from the others? Rose stared at her phone. He'd responded. Not through some assistant, not with a formal brush-off, but personally. And he was asking about her work. She should let it go. Should send a polite thank you and close this strange chapter of her life. Instead, she found herself typing. It's the first one where I'm not trying to convince them I belong in the room. Where I know I'm the best option and I can prove it. Maybe almost getting robbed gives you perspective. Or maybe you just reach a point where you're done apologizing for taking up space. His response came faster this time. The second one. Confidence isn't about what happens to you. It's about knowing your worth regardless. You knew your worth last night too, even when you were standing on my doorstep at 2 a.m. You were afraid, but you didn't grovel. You didn't make yourself smaller. Rose felt something shift in her chest. She sat down on the edge of the bed, phone in hand. Most people would say that's not smart. Being proud when you're in danger. Most people confuse survival with submission. You can be smart and still maintain your dignity. Is that what you do? Maintain dignity in dangerous situations? There was a longer pause this time. Rose watched the three dots appear and disappear twice before his message came through. I maintain control. It's different. Dignity is about how you see yourself. Control is about how others see you. Both matter, but in different ways. And what you do, the knowing everything that happens in your neighborhood, the high-security hotels, the drivers who appear out of nowhere, that's about control. Yes. The single word sat there, bold and honest. No deflection, no carefully crafted explanation. Just the truth. Rose should have been intimidated. Should have recognized the implicit admission of power, the kind that operated outside normal rules. Instead, she found herself fascinated. Does it work? The control? Usually. Last night was an exception. How so? I don't usually open my own door. Rose smiled despite herself. But you did. I was curious. The security camera showed someone who looked lost, not dangerous. And then you knocked like you had every right to be there. Like you weren't afraid. I was terrified. I know. But you knocked anyway. That's the difference between people who survive and people who thrive. You choose action over paralysis, even when you're afraid. Rose looked at the message for a long moment. Outside her window, the city lights spread across the darkness, like a constellation of possibilities. Is that what you do? Thrive? I try. Most days I succeed. And the days you don't, I make sure no one notices. That sounds lonely. The three dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. When his response finally came, it felt heavier than the others. It is. But loneliness is the price of the kind of control I maintain. Some costs are worth paying. Are they? Worth it? Ask me again when you've built your empire, Rose. Then you'll understand the trade. Understands her passion for structure and design. 11:34. The package arrived at Rose's hotel room the next morning, delivered by the same driver who'd taken her to the Morrison building. He handed it to her without a word, just a slight nod, and was gone before she could ask any questions. The box was wooden, sleek and dark, with brass hinges that gleamed in the morning light. No note, no card, nothing to indicate where it had come from except the fact that Sung-ho's driver had been the one to deliver it. Rose set it on the desk by the window and stared at it for a full minute before opening it. Inside, nestled in navy velvet, was a drafting set that made her breath catch. The instruments were vintage, not old in a worn-out way, but old in the way of things that were built to last generations. Compasses and dividers in brass and German silver, their joints still smooth despite what must have been decades of existence. A set of technical pens with tips so fine they could render details most modern architects left to computer precision. Triangles made of genuine ivory, yellowed with age, but perfectly straight. And a mechanical pencil in sterling silver, its weight substantial in her hand, engraved with initials she didn't recognize. Rose lifted the pencil, turned it in the light. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. This wasn't something you bought online or found in an art supply store. This was the kind of tool a master architect would have used back when drafting was done by hand, when every line was a commitment you couldn't undo with a keystroke. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, though she knew who it was before she even opened it. My grandfather's. He designed half the buildings in Seoul before computers made architects lazy. He always said the hand remembers what the mind forgets. Rose sat down slowly, the pencil still in her hand. I can't accept this. It's too much. You already have it. Besides, it's been in a drawer for 5 years. He would have wanted it to be used. By someone who knew him, maybe. Not a stranger. You're not a stranger. You're an architect who understands that buildings are more than structures. They're statements about how we want to live. That's what my grandfather believed. That's what I saw in your portfolio last night. Rose's heart skipped. You looked at my portfolio? You left your laptop open during our conversation. I could see the renderings on your screen. The residential complex you designed. The one with the central courtyard and the vertical gardens. That wasn't about maximizing profit. That was about creating community. Rose remembered that project. Her thesis work, never built, probably never would be. She designed it for a neighborhood like the one she'd grown up in, where people needed beauty and green space, but couldn't afford to leave the city for it. Where architecture could either reinforce isolation or build connection. How did you see that from a laptop screen? I pay attention. And I recognize passion when I see it. You don't design like that unless you care about more than the paycheck. Says the man who lives in a townhouse that probably costs more than I'll make in a lifetime. I didn't always live like this. I remember what it's like to need beauty in places that only offer survival. That's why I noticed your work. Rose traced her finger along the edge of the compass, felt the precision of its construction. Someone had cared about this tool, had maintained it, had used it to create things that mattered. Why are you doing this? The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. His response, when it came, felt careful. Because last night, you knocked on my door by accident and didn't flinch when I answered. Because this morning, you walked into a room and convinced people to bet on your vision. Because you understand that structure and beauty aren't opposites, they're partners. And because my grandfather's tools deserve to be in the hands of someone who'll use them the way he did. With intention, Rose felt something tighten in her chest. She looked at the drafting set, at the decades of craftsmanship contained in that box, and understood that this wasn't just a gift. It was a statement. An acknowledgement of something he'd seen in her that she was only beginning to see in herself. Thank you. I'll take care of them. I know you will. Can I ask you something? Yes. Why did your grandfather stop using them? A longer pause this time. He didn't stop. He died. 5 years ago, at his drafting table, working on a design he never finished. I'm sorry. Don't be. He died doing what he loved. Most people don't get that. Rose held the silver pencil up to the light. Imagine the hands that had held it before hers, the buildings those hands had created. What was he designing when he died? A community center. For a neighborhood that couldn't afford one. Of course he was. I'll use them well. I promise. I believe you. 3 months later, Rose flew back to the city. Not by accident this time, but by invitation. The Morrison project was moving faster than expected. Marcus wanted her on site for the construction kickoff, wanted her to meet with contractors and walk the space before the first wall came down. She'd booked her own hotel this time, a modest place near the site that fit her actual budget. The message came the night she arrived. Welcome back. Dinner? I promise not to answer the door shirtless this time. Rose smiled at her phone, felt that now familiar flutter in her chest that his messages always triggered. Over the past 3 months, they'd texted almost daily, late-night conversations that ranged from architecture to philosophy to the best Korean barbecue spots in the city. He knew about her childhood in Chicago, about the father who'd left and the mother who'd worked 3 jobs to keep them housed. She knew about his grandfather's influence, about growing up between 2 cultures, about the weight of expectations that came with a family name. What she didn't know, What he carefully never mentioned was exactly what business kept him awake at odd hours or why his neighborhood knowledge was so comprehensive it bordered on surveillance. Where? She typed back. My place. 8 p.m. The driver will pick you up. Rose hesitated. His place meant the townhouse, meant crossing a threshold she'd only glimpsed that chaotic first night. It felt significant, like accepting something she couldn't quite name.
Okay.
The driver arrived exactly at 8. The same man as before, though he offered a small smile this time, like she'd been upgraded from suspicious stranger to known entity. The drive took 15 minutes through neighborhoods that grew progressively more elegant, until they pulled up in front of the townhouse with a heavy wooden door and the lion's head knocker. This time, Sung-ho answered immediately. And this time, he was fully dressed, charcoal slacks, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, no jacket. Casual by his standards, which still meant more put together than most people at a formal event. Rose, he said, and the way he said her name, like he'd been waiting to say it out loud for months, made her pulse quicken. Sung-ho. She stepped inside, finally seeing beyond that first glimpse of the entryway. The interior was stunning. High ceilings, original architectural details mixed with modern minimalism, art on the walls that was probably worth more than her car. But it was also lived in. Books stacked on a side table, a laptop open on a desk visible through a doorway, the faint scent of coffee and something cooking. No guards tonight, she asked. They're around, just not visible. He gestured toward the back of the house. Dinner's in the garden. She followed him through a hallway lined with black and white photographs. Old Seoul, modern Seoul, the transformation of a city captured in frames. They emerged into a private courtyard she never would have guessed existed from the street. A single table, set for two, lit by string lights overhead and candles on the table. The October air was cool but not cold, and someone had left a blanket draped over one of the chairs. You cooked? Rose asked, surprised. I had help. But yes, some of it I cooked. He pulled out her chair, and she sat, watching him move to the other side of the table. In the candlelight, she could see details she'd missed that first night. A thin scar along his jawline, another at his temple, the way his hands moved with careful precision, like someone who'd learned to control every gesture. The food was Korean, banchan spread across the table, galbi that fell off the bone, kimchi that had the perfect balance of heat and tang. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing as easily as it did over text, but richer somehow, weighted with physical presence. Tell me about the Morrison project, he said, pouring her more wine. Rose described the challenges, the unexpected complications with permits, the contractor who'd tried to substitute cheaper materials until she'd caught him. Sung-ho listened with the same intensity he brought to everything, asking questions that proved he understood construction logistics better than most architects. You've built things, she said. Haven't you? Some. He looked at her over the rim of his glass. My family's business involves property. Development, management, protection. Protection, Rose repeated. That's an interesting word choice. It's an accurate one. She set down her fork. Can I ask you something I've been wondering for 3 months? Yes. What exactly do you do, Sung-ho? He was quiet for a moment, and in that silence, Rose saw him deciding something. How much truth? How much trust? I make sure certain businesses in this city operate smoothly, he said finally. I mediate disputes. I provide security. I enforce agreements when the law can't or won't. That's very diplomatic phrasing. It's honest phrasing. He leaned forward slightly. Would you prefer I lie?
No.
And she meant it. I prefer knowing where I stand. Where you stand, he said slowly, is across the table from someone who wants you here. Who has wanted you here since the night you knocked on my door and looked at me like I was dangerous, but not dangerous enough to make you run? Rose's breath caught. You were dangerous. I still am. He reached across the table, and she let him take her hand. His palm was warm, his grip gentle but sure. Nothing about that has changed. I know. And you're still here. I am. He turned her hand over, traced the line of her palm with his thumb. Rose saw his gaze catch on something, another scar, this one newer, running across his knuckles. When he noticed her looking, he didn't pull away. Hazard of the profession, he said quietly. Does it hurt? Not anymore. His eyes met hers. Most scars don't, once they heal. Rose started noticing them on her third day back in the city. The first time, she thought it was coincidence. A man in a dark jacket standing across the street from her hotel, watching the entrance. She glanced at him twice before dismissing it. This was a city. People stood on sidewalks. It didn't mean anything. The second time was harder to dismiss. A different man, but the same watchful quality, the same deliberate positioning. This one was outside the Morrison building when she left a contractor meeting. He didn't approach, didn't even acknowledge her, but she felt his eyes track her movement down the block. The third time, she was certain. Two men this time, following her through the outdoor market where she'd gone to buy fresh flowers for her hotel room. They maintained distance, never got close enough to be threatening, but they were there, matching her pace, turning when she turned, stopping when she stopped to examine a vendor's display of chrysanthemums. Rose pulled out her phone. Are you having me followed? Sung-ho's response came within seconds.
Yes.
No explanation, no apology. Just confirmation. Rose felt something cold settle in her stomach. She paid for the flowers with shaking hands, walked back to her hotel with those two shadows trailing half a block behind.
Why?
Because 3 people have asked about you in the past week. Who you are, why you're here, who you're seeing. I don't like when people ask questions about things that concern me. Things? I'm not a thing.
No.
You're someone I care about, which makes you a vulnerability. And vulnerabilities get exploited. Rose sat on her hotel bed, the flowers forgotten on the desk. She thought about the dinner in the garden, the way his hand had felt wrapped around hers, the scars he hadn't tried to hide. She thought about all the careful language he'd used, mediation, security, enforcement, and realized how naive she'd been to accept those words at face value. What kind of questions? The kind that means someone is deciding whether you're useful leverage or just an interesting coincidence. Leverage for what? The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times. When his message finally came, it was longer than usual. There are people who think I've been too comfortable lately. Too secure. They want to test that security, find the cracks. You're new in my life. That makes you a potential crack. Rose felt her hands go cold. So having me followed keeps me safe or keeps you safe?
Both.
If they think you're protected, they're less likely to approach you. If they approach you anyway, my people are there to intervene. And if I don't want to be protected? If I don't want to be a piece in whatever game you're playing? A longer pause. Then you should go home, Rose. Book a flight tonight. Finish the Morrison project remotely. Delete my number, and forget you ever knocked on my door. Rose stared at the message, felt something crack open in her chest. He wasn't fighting her, wasn't trying to convince her to stay. He was giving her an out, clean and clear, because he knew, they both knew, that staying meant accepting a reality she'd been carefully avoiding for 3 months. Is that what you want? For me to leave?
No.
But what I want and what's safe for you are different things. Let me decide what's safe for me. You can't decide if you don't understand the full picture. Then show me the full picture. No response. Rose watched the screen, willing the 3 dots to appear. She stood, paced to the window, looked down at the street below. There, The man in the dark jacket, different from the market but same purpose, standing at the corner like a sentinel. Her phone buzzed. "Tomorrow night. I'll show you what I do. What I really do. And then you decide if you want to stay." Rose's heart hammered against her ribs. "Where?" "The driver will pick you up at midnight. Wear dark clothes. And Rose, once you see this, you can't unsee it. There's no going back to thinking I'm just a businessman with a nice house." She looked at the flowers on her desk, at the drafting set she'd brought with her in her luggage, at her reflection in the darkened window. She thought about Chicago, about the life she'd built there, safe and predictable. She thought about the Morrison Project, about proving herself, about all the reasons she'd worked so hard to escape the chaos of her childhood. And then she thought about Sung-ho's hand wrapped around hers, about the way he listened when she talked about her designs, about the grandfather's tools that sat in velvet, waiting to be used by hands that understood their purpose. "I'll be ready." "I hope so." The message felt like a warning and a promise all at once. Rose set down her phone and went to her closet, pulling out black jeans and a dark sweater. Whatever tomorrow night brought, whatever truth waited on the other side of midnight, she'd chosen this. She'd knocked on his door once by accident. This time, she was walking in with her eyes open. The attack came at 11 p.m., an hour before the driver was supposed to pick her up. Rose was in her hotel room, already dressed in dark jeans and a black sweater, reviewing some Morrison Project files on her laptop to keep her nerves steady. She'd ordered room service earlier, tea and a sandwich she'd barely touched, and was contemplating whether midnight was too early to show up downstairs when her phone rang. Not a text. A call. From Marcus Webb. "Rose, where are you?" His voice was tight, stressed in a way she'd never heard before. "At my hotel."
Why?
"What's wrong?" "Someone broke into the Morrison site. Trashed the temporary office we set up for you. Your laptop, your files, your models, everything's destroyed." Rose's stomach dropped. "What? When?" "Security called it in 20 minutes ago. The police are here now, but Rose..." He paused, and she heard him take a breath. "They left a message. Spray painted on the wall. It says, 'Tell your boyfriend he chose wrong.'" The room seemed to tilt. Rose gripped the edge of the desk, her mind racing. I don't understand." Who would? But she did understand. The questions people had been asking. The vulnerabilities that get exploited. The tests Sung-ho had mentioned. "I'm coming down there," she said. "The police want to talk to you anyway." "Rose, do you know what this is about? Do you have any idea who?" "I'll explain when I get there." She hung up before he could ask more questions she couldn't answer. Her hands were shaking as she grabbed her coat and bag. She should call Sung-ho. Should tell him what happened. But something stopped her. Pride, maybe, or the stubborn need to see the damage herself before admitting she'd become exactly what he'd warned her about. A crack in his armor. A vulnerability. The hotel lobby was empty, except for the night clerk. Rose pushed through the front doors into the cold October air, already pulling up a rideshare app on her phone. She didn't see the van until it was too late. It pulled up fast, side door sliding open before it had fully stopped. Two men jumped out, moving toward her with purpose. Rose's training kicked in, the self-defense classes she'd taken in college, the street smarts from growing up in neighborhoods where you learn to be aware or you learn to be a victim. She ran. Not back into the hotel. That would trap her, but down the street, toward the lights and traffic of the main avenue 3 blocks away. Her sneakers slapped against pavement, her breath coming in sharp gasps. Behind her, she heard footsteps, heavy and fast, gaining ground. She didn't make it to the corner. A hand grabbed her arm, yanked her backward with enough force to nearly pull her off her feet. Rose twisted, drove her elbow back the way she'd been taught, felt it connect with something solid. The man grunted, but didn't let go. Message for your boyfriend, he said, his accent thick, his breath hot against her ear. He doesn't own this city. The words cut off with a wet, choking sound. The grip on Rose's arm vanished. She stumbled forward, caught herself against a parked car, spun around. Sung-ho stood behind where the man had been, his hand still wrapped around the man's throat, lifting him half off the ground. In the streetlight, Rose saw his face, and it was nothing like the controlled, measured man who'd served her dinner in his garden. This was something else entirely. Something cold and lethal and absolutely merciless. The man clawed at Sung-ho's wrist, his face turning purple. Sung-ho said something in Korean, low and vicious, then threw the man aside like he weighed nothing. The man hit the pavement hard, gasping. The second attacker was already on the ground, bleeding from his nose, with two of Sung-ho's men standing over him. Sung-ho turned to Rose. His eyes swept over her, checking for damage with a thoroughness that felt almost clinical. "Are you hurt?" Rose shook her head, unable to speak. She'd seen violence before, grew up around it, knew its rhythms and patterns, but this was different. This was precise. Professional. This was a man who knew exactly how much pressure it took to incapacitate without killing, who could calculate threat and response in the space between heartbeats. "Your hotel room."
Now.
It wasn't a request. He gripped her elbow, gently, despite what those same hands had just done, and guided her back toward the hotel entrance. The lobby clerk took one look at Sung-ho's face and suddenly became very interested in his computer screen. They rode the elevator in silence. Rose's hands were still shaking, adrenaline flooding her system in waves. Sung-ho stood beside her, close enough that she could see his knuckles were split and bleeding, that there was a tear in his shirt she hadn't noticed before. Inside her room, he locked the door, checked the windows, pulled the curtains closed. Then he turned to her, and some of the coldness had left his expression, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "They hit the Morrison site first," he said. "To draw you out. To make you predictable." His jaw tightened. "I should have anticipated that." "How did you know?" "I have someone monitoring the police scanners. When the break-in was called in, I knew what it meant." He stepped closer, reached out like he wanted to touch her face, then stopped himself. "Rose, this is what I am. What I do. That man downstairs, I would have killed him if you hadn't been watching. I've killed before. I'll kill again." Rose looked at him, at the blood on his knuckles, at the controlled violence still simmering beneath his surface, at the truth he was finally showing her without filters or careful language. "I know," she said quietly. "And you're still here." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "I'm still here." Sung-ho's men swept the hotel room while Rose sat on the edge of the bed, watching him pace. He'd made 3 phone calls in rapid Korean, each one clipped and authoritative, issuing orders she couldn't understand but could feel the weight of. When he finally hung up, the silence between them felt massive. "Pack your things," he said. "You're not staying here tonight." "Where am I going?" "My place. Where I can protect you properly." He stopped pacing, looked at her directly. "Or the airport. I can have you on a flight to Chicago in 3 hours. Your choice." Rose's hands curled into fists against her thighs. "You're giving me an ultimatum. I'm giving you an exit. There's a difference." He crossed to the window, even though the curtains were closed, like he needed to look at something other than her face. "This is my fault. I knew better than to let you get close. I knew what it would make you, and I did it anyway because I was selfish." "Selfish," Rose repeated. "Is that what you call it? What would you call it?" "I brought danger into your life because I liked the way you looked at me, because talking to you made me feel like something other than what I am." His voice was rough, stripped of the usual control. That's the definition of selfish, Rose. She stood, walked to where he was standing. Up close, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands were clenched at his sides like he was physically restraining himself from reaching for her. "You want to know what I call it?" she said quietly. "I call it the first time in my life someone saw me, really saw me, and didn't try to make me smaller to fit their comfort level. I'm not making you smaller. I'm trying to keep you alive. By sending me away? By deciding for me what risks I can handle." Rose shook her head. "I grew up in neighborhoods where people got shot for wearing the wrong colors, where my mom worked 3 jobs and still couldn't keep us safe from everything. I know what danger looks like, Sung-ho. This isn't new to me. This is different. Because it's your world instead of mine? Because the violence wears expensive suits." She moved closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "I'm not some naive girl who stumbled into something she doesn't understand. I knocked on your door. I came to dinner. I stayed even after I knew what you were. Those were my choices. Choices you made without knowing the full cost. And now I know.
I saw what you did to that man.
I saw what you're capable of." She held his gaze. "I'm still standing here." Sung-ho's control cracked. He reached for her, cupped her face in his hands, those same hands that had lifted a man off the ground by his throat an hour ago, and the touch was so gentle it made her chest ache. "If you stay," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "your life will never be simple again. There will always be guards, always be threats, always be people who think they can hurt me by hurting you." "If I leave," Rose countered, "I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what I gave up because I was too afraid to choose something real over something safe. Safe matters. So does living." She covered his hands with hers. "My whole life, I've played it safe. Took the scholarships, built the portfolio, kept my head down and my goals realistic. And you know what? I was good at it. I was successful. But I wasn't alive, not really. Not until I knocked on the wrong door at 2 in the morning and met someone who looked at my designs and saw what I was trying to say." "Rose, the GPS didn't glitch, did it?" The realization hit her suddenly, pieces clicking into place. "Someone redirected it deliberately. You said that the first night. Someone wanted me at your door." Sung-ho's expression shifted, something like surprise crossing his face before he could hide it. "Who?" Rose pressed. "Who would do that?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I had it investigated. It was a rival organization, the same one who hit the Morrison site tonight. They'd been monitoring rideshare patterns, looking for an opportunity to create chaos in my territory. You were random chance. Wrong place, wrong time. Or right place, right time." Rose stepped back, his hands falling away from her face. "That's what you said that first night, that it depended on how I looked at it. I was being poetic. This is reality. Reality is that I'm standing in a hotel room with a man who terrifies me and fascinates me in equal measure. Reality is that I've never felt more seen, more understood, more challenged than I do when I'm talking to you." She picked up her bag from the chair, started gathering her things. "Reality is that I'm not getting on a plane to Chicago tonight. Rose, I'm packing my things like you told me to. I'm going to your place. And tomorrow, I'm going to figure out how to rebuild what was destroyed at the Morrison site because that's my project and I don't quit." She turned to face him. "And then when things calm down, you're going to show me exactly what my life looks like if I stay. Not the sanitized version. The real one. And I'll decide if I can live with it." Sung-ho stared at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, small and genuine, and a little bit stunned. "You're remarkable, you know that? I knocked on a Mafia boss's door at 2 a.m. and lived to tell about it. I'd say remarkable is the minimum requirement. She zipped her bag closed. Now, are you going to stand there looking at me like I'm insane? Or are we going to get out of here before someone else decides to send a message? He moved then, took her bag from her hand, opened the door. His men were in the hallway, a silent wall of protection that would have terrified her a week ago. Now it just felt like confirmation that she'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. As they walked to the elevator, Sung-ho's hand found the small of her back, a gesture that was both protective and possessive. Rose leaned into it slightly, acknowledging what it meant. The GPS had sent her to the wrong address. But standing here now, walking into an unknown future with a dangerous man and open eyes, Rose couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, she'd ended up exactly where she was supposed to be all along. 6 months later, Rose stood in the completed Morrison building, watching the afternoon light filter through the windows she'd designed to maximize natural illumination. The project had come in under budget and ahead of schedule, earning her 3 more contracts in the city and a reputation as an architect who delivered on her promises. Her phone buzzed. A message from Sung-ho. "Dinner tonight? I have something to show you." She smiled, typed back a quick yes, and returned to her conversation with the structural engineer. She'd learned to navigate both worlds now. The legitimate one where she built spaces that brought communities together, and the shadowed one where Sung-ho maintained the kind of control that kept those communities safe in ways most people never saw or understood. It wasn't easy. There were still guards, still threats, still moments when she questioned whether the cost was worth it. But then she'd come home to find Sung-ho at his grandfather's drafting table, working on designs for the community center the old man never finished, and she'd remember why she'd chosen this. Why she'd knocked on that door, and kept knocking, even when every rational instinct told her to run. Some wrong turns lead you exactly where you need to be. You just have to be brave enough to walk through the door when it opens. If this story resonated with you, if you felt Rose's struggle between safety and passion, between the life she planned and the one she found, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Have you ever taken a chance on something that looked dangerous but felt right? Have you ever had a wrong turn become the best decision of your life? Subscribe for more stories about ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances, about love that demands courage, and about the moments that change everything. Because sometimes the GPS doesn't glitch. Sometimes it just knows better than we do where we're supposed to end up. Drop a comment telling me what you do in Rose's situation. Would you have gotten on that plane to Chicago? Or would you have stayed? I read every single comment, and your answers might just inspire the next story. Thanks for watching, and remember, the wrong address might just be the right destination.